The young biker looked down, muttering something unintelligible. The others laughed again, and the leader returned his attention to the veteran, who was still standing silently, his fishing rod in one hand and his tackle box now resting by his feet. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the veteran's cap, and for a brief moment, the faint sound of a flag flapping somewhere in the distance seemed to echo through the dock. "You don't know who you're messing with, do you?" The veteran finally said, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that made even the most hardened biker pause. "You think you're tough because you can scare people. Let me tell you something, real toughness doesn't need to shout." The bikers exchanged uncertain glances. The tension was thick now, an invisible line drawn between the veteran and the group. The air felt heavy, and even the bystanders seemed frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Something told everyone there that this confrontation was far from over. The leader of the bikers took a step closer, his boots scuffing loudly against the weathered wood of the dock. His grin twisted into something darker, a mix of defiance and irritation. "You've got a lot to say for someone standing alone," he sneered. "Maybe you need a reminder of how the world works now." The veteran tilted his head slightly, a flicker of amusement crossing his face, as if the biker's words were more amusing than threatening. He let the silence linger, knowing it would rattle them more than any response. The younger biker from before shifted uncomfortably, his unease growing as the moment stretched. Even some of the bystanders, previously watching from a safe distance, edged closer, their curiosity outweighing their hesitation. The leader, sensing his authority slipping, suddenly reached out and snatched the veteran's cap off his head. "What's this supposed to mean anyway?" he barked, holding it up like a trophy. He squinted at the faded stitching that read, World War II veteran *, and let out a short, mocking laugh. "What? You think this makes you special?" The old man's demeanor shifted. He stepped forward, not quickly, not aggressively, but with a kind of precision that made everyone take notice. His eyes fixed on the leader with a calm intensity that seemed to drain the color from the biker's face. "Put it down," the veteran said, his voice firm, steady, and low. It wasn't a request. For a moment, the leader hesitated, caught off guard by the sheer force behind those 3 words. The dock was silent now, except for the gentle lapping of the water against the pilings. The other bikers stood frozen, their bravado crumbling as they watched the quiet storm brewing in the old man's eyes. "You've got no idea what that cap stands for," the veteran continued, his voice gaining weight. "And you don't want to find out." The leader opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the veteran took another step forward. The tension snapped like a taut rope, and all eyes were on the man who no longer looked frail or defenseless. The leader of the bikers froze, his fingers tightening around the veteran's cap, as if holding it gave him some measure of control. But there was a shift now, something even the other bikers could feel, a change in the air around them. The veteran wasn't just an old man anymore. He was a force, and his presence seemed to grow with every step he took. Before the leader could regain his composure, the younger biker, the one who had been uneasy from the start, spoke up again. "Boss, maybe we should just go," he said, his voice louder this time, tinged with a mixture of fear and respect. "This guy, he's not like the others." The leader whipped around to glare at him. "What's your problem? You scared of some grandpa with a fishing pole?" But the young man wasn't looking at his leader anymore. His eyes were fixed on the veteran, wide with recognition. "I've seen him before," he muttered, almost to himself. "On TV or something. He's one of those war heroes. The real deal." The others exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence faltering further. The veteran didn't say a word. He simply watched, letting the truth settle among them like a heavy fog. His silence carried more weight than any boast or threat ever could. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed across the dock, and all heads turned. A park ranger, tall and broad-shouldered, was walking toward the group with purpose. He held a radio in one hand, his sharp eyes assessing the scene. It was a quiet afternoon at the old fishing dock, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. The gentle lapping of the water and the occasional chirp of a seagull created a peaceful escape for those who sought it. Among the regulars that day was an elderly man, sitting calmly on a wooden bench with a fishing rod in hand. His presence exuded a quiet strength, his weathered face telling stories of years gone by. He wasn't just any ordinary fisherman. This man was a World War II veteran. But he didn't wear his history on his sleeve, just a faded military cap and a knowing smile that hinted at a lifetime of service and sacrifice. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, the tranquility was shattered by the roar of motorcycle engines. A group of rowdy bikers rolled up, their laughter loud and their intentions less than friendly. They were clearly looking for trouble, and their eyes landed on the old man, alone and seemingly defenseless. "Hey, Grandpa," one of them jeered, swaggering over. "Catch anything other than a nap today?" The others chuckled, their presence casting an unwelcome shadow over the serene dock. The old man didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly reeled in his line, the corner of his mouth twitching into a faint, unreadable smile. What the bikers didn't know, and what they were about to learn the hard way, was that they had just picked the wrong target. Beneath that quiet demeanor and frail appearance was a man who had faced challenges far greater than a few unruly bullies. What happened next would leave everyone, bikers included, stunned and wondering how they had underestimated this quiet hero. Stick around, because this is a story you'll never forget. The air grew tense as the bikers closed in on the old man. They towered over him, their leather jackets and tattooed arms giving them an intimidating edge. One of them, the tallest with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, leaned in close. "Nice hat," he sneered, pointing at the veteran's cap. "What's it for? Show and tell at the retirement home." The group burst into laughter, their voices echoing across the dock. The old man remained still, his hands steady on his fishing rod. He glanced up at them, his piercing blue eyes betraying none of the thoughts racing through his mind. He didn't need to explain himself to anyone, let alone this group of strangers looking for amusement at his expense. Behind him, a couple of other fishermen watched the scene unfold. They exchanged uneasy glances, but hesitated to step in. It wasn't their business, or so they thought. The leader of the group, a stocky man with a scruffy beard, grabbed the veteran's tackle box and flipped it open, scattering hooks and bait across the dock. "Oops," he said mockingly. "Guess your fishing day's over." Still, the old man didn't react. He bent down, picking up a few pieces of bait, his movements calm and deliberate. His silence seemed to rattle the bikers more than any words could have. They wanted a reaction, and he wasn't giving it to them. "Come on, old man. Say something," another biker taunted. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue." The veteran straightened up slowly, his gaze meeting theirs. The smile was gone now, replaced by a quiet intensity that made even the loudest biker falter for a moment. "You boys done?" he asked, his voice steady but low, carrying a weight that cut through their bravado like a knife. The bikers exchanged looks, their confidence starting to waver. Something about the man didn't sit right, but they weren't ready to back down, yet. The bikers didn't back off. Instead, they doubled down, sensing an opportunity to assert their dominance. The leader, emboldened by the laughter of his crew, stepped closer to the old man, standing just inches from his face. "You think you're tough, don't you? Sitting here all quiet like you're better than us." The old man didn't move, didn't even blink. His eyes stayed locked on the leader's, calm but sharp. It was as if he could see straight through him, down to every insecurity he tried to hide behind his leather jacket and loud attitude. Meanwhile, one of the younger bikers, a wiry guy with messy hair, glanced around nervously. He didn't seem as sure about what they were doing. "Maybe we should just leave him alone," he mumbled, but his voice was drowned out by the others. "Leave him alone," the leader barked, turning to glare at the younger man. "What's the matter? Scared of an old geezer? Is there a problem here?" the ranger asked, his tone calm but firm. The bikers stiffened, their bravado cracking under the ranger's scrutiny. The leader hesitated, glancing between the veteran, his crew, and the approaching figure of authority. For a moment, it looked like they might back down. But then the leader, desperate to save face, made a reckless decision. "Yeah, there's a problem," he said, tossing the cap to the ground. "This old man's been running his mouth, and we're just teaching him some respect." The tension spiked again, the stakes higher now with the ranger in the mix. The veteran's eyes flickered to the cap on the ground, then back to the leader. He said nothing, but the look on his face made one thing clear: this wasn't over. The doc fell silent, every breath held as the leader squared off against the veteran. The park ranger took another step forward, his hand hovering near his radio. "That's enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Pick up the cap, apologize, and leave. Now." The leader hesitated, his pride visibly wrestling with the weight of the situation. The other bikers stood awkwardly behind him, their earlier confidence now replaced by uncertainty. But before he could decide, the veteran finally spoke, his voice calm but unyielding. "No need for an apology," he said, holding up a hand to the ranger. "Let him learn another way." The old man bent down and picked up his cap, brushing it off with care before placing it back on his head. When he straightened up, his stance was solid, his expression unreadable. "You think you're teaching me respect," he said, fixing his gaze on the leader. "Let me show you what it really looks like." He reached into his tackle box, not for a weapon, as the bikers might have feared, but for a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it carefully, he handed it to the leader, who took it with visible reluctance. The paper was old, its edges frayed, but the words on it were clear. It was a citation for bravery, signed by a president decades ago. The leader's smirk faded as he read it, the weight of the words sinking in. He looked up, his bravado now replaced by something closer to shame. "I didn't know," he started, his voice trailing off. "You didn't care," the veteran interrupted, "until now." The ranger stepped closer, eyeing the group. "Time to go, fellas," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The bikers began to shuffle away, but as they did, the young biker, the one who had recognized the veteran, turned back. "Thank you," he said quietly, his words almost lost to the wind. The veteran nodded, tipping his cap. "Remember that the next time you see someone like me." As the dock cleared and the sun dipped lower, the ranger turned to the veteran. "You all right, sir?" The old man smiled faintly, picking up his fishing rod. "I faced worse," he said, casting his line back into the water. But as he sat down, the faintest flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. He hadn't just taught them a lesson, he'd reminded them, and himself, that true strength isn't about fighting. It's about standing tall, even when the odds are against you. And just as the dock settled back into its peaceful rhythm, a loud splash broke the silence. The leader's bike, left too close to the edge, had tipped into the water. The veteran glanced at the ranger, who stifled a laugh, and together they shared a look that said it all. Some lessons, after all, had a way of making themselves unforgettable. The dock slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm as the bikers trudged away, their confidence replaced by quiet reflection. The leader, drenched from the effort of retrieving his motorcycle from the water, cast one last glance at the veteran, but said nothing. The group mounted their bikes and rode off, their engines fading into the distance. The veteran remained seated at the edge of the dock, his fishing line steady in the water. He looked calm, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the way he adjusted his cap, now firmly back on his head. The ranger lingered nearby, leaning against a wooden post as he watched the sun dip lower in the sky. "You handled that better than most," the ranger said after a while, breaking the silence. The veteran gave a small chuckle. "Learned a long time ago that battles aren't always won with fists. Sometimes the strongest move is just standing your ground." The ranger nodded, tipping his hat in respect. "Well, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." "Sir, that was incredible," he said. "I don't think I'll ever forget what I saw today." The veteran smiled, reeling in his line to check the bait. "Just remember," he said, Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. Doesn't matter if you're young or old, strong or weak. The way you treat others says more about you than any badge or title ever could.